2006 to 2011, Epic Games developed, perfected, and released a trilogy of games that have defined not only third-person shooters in the 360 era and onward, but also helped define the Xbox 360 itself, from both forcing Microsoft to increase the memory on the Xbox, to setting standards for games, both visually and mechanically, for years to come. Then, in 2013, just before the franchise was sold to Xbox, Epic's main team worked with People Can Fly on a Gears of War prequel, a la Halo Reach. But unlike Reach, which is still revered to this day and even eclipsed Halo 3 in popularity among some fans, Gears of War Judgment has found itself at the bottom of the barrel of all the Gears games, outside of some political motivations that have people putting it above Gears 4 or Gears 5 that we'll get into later. But is that slander deserved? Is Judgment actually that bad? Does it deserve the hate, or does it just suffer from the little brother syndrome of coming off the heels of the fantastic conclusion that was Gears of War 3? But that's exactly what we're here to talk about today in another episode of Games We That's ISIS thing. This is a years later video. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, me. Hi, Buster from the Editing Crack Den here. So actually, I had a whole skit planned out and a whole little funny thing I was going to do, and then I just kind of ran out of time for it, and a device I needed to make the skit happen got destroyed because I have a 3-year-old. I'll spare you the boring details. So to do away with the facade, because I still want to get this out at a reasonable time for all of my members and patrons and everyone like that, I'm just going to speak to you, face to screen a little bit honestly, because that's also part of what this whole thing is. If you go to the spring link down below, you'll find a bunch of different merchandise that I sell. It'll either be branded as Colorful World like this one is, wrong side. This, where it's got like nice messages and stuff about being kind, things like that. There's one run called No Hesitation to Help, which is more like, help people, and it's more aggressive in its design. All the stuff is designed by me, and then all the profits that I make from these get donated directly to charity. In 2024, I had like 2.7 million views on the channel. It might have been 1.7. Out of the millions of people who watched my stuff in 2024, I raised about $100 that got sent to my local food bank. It might not sound like a lot, and truthfully, I wish it was a lot more. That's still $100 helping people who didn't have that help before. And especially at the time this video is coming out and the kind of climate we found ourselves in, I'm also very delighted to announce that not only is there all the regular merch stuff that kind of goes to my local food bank, there's a series of LGBTQ+ or Pride-centric merchandise that has the profits from those donated to the Trevor Project. And of course, at the end of the year, or whenever, monthly, if it's doing well enough, all of those receipts of what I make from the merchandise store and where it gets donated to is uploaded in my Discord, which is also down below. So if you want confirmation that it's not, I don't want to make you feel like you're being scammed. Obviously, that would be a fucking heinous thing to do. Dude, these clothes are awesome. This is like one I got for myself, right? But like, I wear it almost every day. I work a 9 to 5 in a hot warehouse, and I'm still wearing this bitch. It's so goddamn comfy. And if you got a little bit of extra cash and you're like, I want something that comfy, and I want to help out even more, there's a special Buster Gold series of merch you can find on there that is overpriced on purpose, because it just means higher price tag means there's more profit coming off of it on my end, which means there's more money going to charity. And that's about it. Merch stores down below in the links. There's probably images of all the different merch options and stuff like that up on the screen now, so you can get a taste of what it looks like, how cool it is. There's an Arcane reference if you're feeling fantastic, so just do me a solid, go check it out, see if anything tickles your fancy. There's mugs, posters, shirts, sweatshirts, jackets, a jersey, I think, and an apron if you paint like I do. So go check it out. Links down in the description. Get back to the bullshit. And again, big thank you to everybody watching this, and another big thanks to all my wonderful patrons and YouTube members who support the channel. And without further ado, let's get right into it.
It also is an opportunity for us, because the fact that it's outside of the trilogy, that we not only can play with it and experiment and try new things. And so when you go and play, you realize we've remapped controls, the way that we tell stories are different, the way that you play the game is different. What's really interesting is even with all those changes, it actually feels a little bit more like Gears 1. It has that sort of essence of Gears combat to it, that it feels like the combat bowls and the straightforwardness of it and the intensity and the visceralness of it harkens back to Gears 1 more, yet it's a lot of changes to kind of the formula.
Beginning development right after Gears of War 3, Judgment was the first Gears project that required a whole new studio to assist in People Can Fly. In fact, People Can Fly led the work on Judgment, with Epic acting as the supporting studio. With their belts marked by the somewhat solid success that was Bulletstorm, People Can Fly were pulled off the first steps of Bulletstorm 2 to make this new Gears game. Probably the most disappointing thing about Judgment I found in all of my research. But when the game eventually came out in May of 2013, Judgment was met to solid critic reviews, sitting around 80% positive in mixed community scores. Now, to me, what that generally means for games is that the game itself is a solid piece of fun, but it did something to piss off fans or players in some way, for half the audience to react with vitriol, and the other half to just sort of be on the sidelines. Nothing special, nothing awful, but nothing great. Now, what was the grave sin Judgment committed to attract such middling user scores, and even today, in 2025, and is it deserved? The biggest changes for Judgment are coming from both a design level and mechanical level. Design-wise, a lot of odd choices came through that really made Judgment feel different from the rest of the original trilogy. We'll get into this more later, but things like free-for-all, multiplayer featuring exclusively human avatars, and a story that feels confused about what kind of game it is, all contribute to this air of what that a lot of players had to deal with. Again, as an outsider, maybe it's not so noticeable, but there is a layer of grit, or more specifically atmosphere, missing from this game. Now, Judgment is a game about broken things. The cog is broken. They just got invaded by demons that appear anywhere at any time. The cast is broken. They're being reprimanded and sent on the executioner's block. The locusts are broken. Ragers that constantly teeter on the edge of psychopathy and precision. The villain is broken, Karn with his malformed figure and similarly disfigured mount. Halvo Bay, the city it takes place in, is constantly being barraged by artillery fire and flames that reach into the skies. A week ago there was a parade in the streets. People were eating with their families and enjoying the coastline. Now, it's all in ruin. That's all good. The general theme I love in Judgment. This was also the first Gears game written by Tom Bissell, who, at the time in 2013, had only been loosely connected to the gaming world. His first real involvement was back in 2009, when he wrote a New Yorker piece on Cliff Bleszinski. Judgment marked both his and co-writer Rob Otten's first foray into video game storytelling. And hey, I get it. I'm an aspiring writer too. If someone offered me a shot at working on Gears of War, I'd be on to that. But compared to someone like Joshua Ortega or Karen Travis, both of whom had already written several works before jumping into Gears 2 and Gears 3, you can feel the difference. Even when their scripts lacked deep character work, they still fit neatly within the broader universe. If you've seen my Gears 5 review, you know that when I say a story is broken, I don't just mean thematically. I mean the world building itself no longer lines up. The continuity between what we've been told and what we're now being told falls apart. And unfortunately, a lot of that incoherence traces back to Bissell's influence, but we'll get deeper into the mess of the story later. Gears 1 is 14 years after Emergence Day, the day when the Locust rose up. Gears 2 is not long after that, and Gears 3 is about a year and a half past the sinking of Jacinto at the end of Gears of War 2. Judgment, on the other hand, takes us right to the beginning, just weeks after the Locust emerged. But Judgment is also built directly on the framework of Gears of War 3, the same animations, textures, assets, and more being used in both. Meaning, things like the Lancer Mark II, which didn't exist weeks after E-Day and won't exist until a year after Judgment takes place, is here, even though it shouldn't be. Cliffy B thought it'd be weird to have a Gears game without the Lancer. Sure, fine. We can change that, retcon that. Which also retcons the entire book they're using as inspiration for Gears E-Day now, where the Lancer Mark II is conceptualized and introduced. But That's an issue for the Coalition, unless they just ignore it entirely, which I wouldn't put past them. Along with the Lancer, there's various other lore discrepancies that just sort of get waved off. In Gears of War 2, we hear this.
Down here, something else to shoot.
As it's the first time Marcus and Dom ever encountered a Cantus deep in the Hollow. Now, Judgment establishes that Marcus and Dom were in Halvo Bay. We even get dialogue directly from Marcus.
This is Omega 2. We're pinned down 2 blocks from the museum. We need an evac.
But there's also Cantus priests everywhere. Same with Theron guards, which Baird had to explain to Marcus in Gears 1. But again, they're literally everywhere. So either we have to accept that Marcus and Dom didn't run into any of the literal hundreds of Locusts in Halvo Bay and continued to not do so for another 14 years, or we just ignore those earlier introductions and chalk it up to, it's a video game, we have to introduce new enemies. This is a prequel, so we can have those new enemies, but it's also earlier in the timeline, so let's just ignore it. In those wide berths of just ignoring what should clearly be solid facts that are literally told to us in the old games, Judgment's writing sort of just ignores the issue. They could have created variants of the Locust who existed early on in the war and later died out.
Really? Rangers?
But no, we just get all these Locusts reused with no regard for the continuity of the universe. Which may not seem like a big deal, but imagine if the Gravemind pulled up in Halo Reach and just said, hey, what's up? I'm here now. Not that it theoretically couldn't happen, but it would be mighty confusing and lame as shit. In the video on Gears 5, I ragged a lot on the narrative team at the Coalition for disregarding the continuity and ignoring entire swaths of established lore so they could come up with a new excuse to add in new enemy types. We see this with the Blood Leeches and Scions. Rather than using the constraints of the lore to give themselves guidelines to be creative from, they just ignored the guidelines anyways. But the sad thing is, that creative laziness didn't start with Gears 5. The precedent was already being set here in Gears Judgment. This is where it became okay to break the rules if they got in the way of a new feature. This is where the erosion of the lore didn't just begin, it was normalized. Now, one thing about the atmosphere in Judgment I have zero issues with is the score, which was created by Steve Jablonski and supported by Jacob Shee. It's honestly one of my favorite Gears soundtracks because it's mostly Gears 3's score again, with new compositions that reflect Judgment's more frantic, fresh war atmosphere. It doesn't have the faded glory of Gears 1, the grand symphonies of 2 and 3, it's rough, it's loud, and it yells out when you're going along. But aside from the issues and the good parts of the atmosphere that Judgment creates for itself, the biggest change between Judgment and previous games without a doubt was the core gameplay. From the removal of the weapon wheel, a major alteration to the control scheme and basic rules being entirely taken out, Judgment did some things that I don't mind, and a lot more that everyone universally hated. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The entire control scheme is almost completely different, shifting the gameplay towards more fluid shooting, but away from the traditional cover-based combat that Gears was known for. Rather than a whole wheel of weapons to choose from, now you have a primary, secondary, and grenades, effectively making pistols useless aside from personal preference. Because why would you take a bolt hawk when you can have a long shot or a Marksa? Grenades lose some sense of utility but play a more prominent role in firefights. On one hand, it's nice that they can be thrown out without being switched to, and that they can stick to enemies from a distance. On the other, now it's harder if not impossible to plant grenades as a landmine. And now that everybody gets grenades in multiplayer on spawn, they've become weaker across the board to make up for the higher volume that you see of them. The next biggest core change was the down but not out system. Basically, in previous games, you'd go down, be able to crawl to teammates and either picked up or get yourself up. In Judgment, with the exception of the campaign, you just die. Now in games like Overrun and Survival, you can be revived by a stim grenade, which feels like a change for the sake of making the medic class more of a necessity, but it's definitely a change that feels like it was made just for that one class in those game modes, but doesn't enhance the game's core at all. The next immediately obvious change was the introduction of verticality to the gameplay, lifted ledges and enhanced fall distance, and first for Gears of War, fall damage. This is one that feels for the better, but could have also been implemented in a way that felt more integral to the game. Some cover can be vaulted over, others can be vaulted onto. Some ledges can be dropped off of, others not at all. There is not much consistency in where and when these ledges seem to be, but overall I think it's an interesting implementation, and with more design put into the maps themselves, could really make it fantastic. But besides from the core changes that can feel give or go and will either turn you off entirely if you're an old fan, or might not make a difference to you, there's also a smattering of smaller changes that personally I thought were good picks for the series. The first one being that now there is a necessity with the loadout changes to require that the boom shield can now be taken with any primary, no longer reserved for pistols, making the shield feel a lot stronger, but still limited by the fact that the shield counts as a heavy weapon, meaning you're slower and can't vault or take cover. Another big change, which was a strange dynamic for Gears at the time, was a focus on class dynamics, which was later improved upon in Gears 4 and later made a little redundant in Gears 5, but overall a system which contributed a lot to the flavor of the PvE experience in Gears. But we'll get into that more later on. And with the classes, there was also a kind of arcadey nature to the campaign. Still cinematic, still dramatic, but now we've got a star system judging you on how well you do, optional side objectives, and somewhat odd endpoints to get you through the campaign. This isn't really a matter of being good or bad, but in personal preference, I'm just not a fan of it, or would prefer it to be optional like arcade was in Gears 3, which is extra confusing when the entire system is completely absent from the Aftermath bonus campaign. The biggest takeaway I have with Judgment's gameplay is while they introduced some ideas that I think were improved on in the future, nothing in this game is really going to blow you away. As an outside fan, it's interesting, kind of blending older boomer shooters with the Gears format. But for any long-time Gears fans, it's almost an inversion of everything that the OG trilogy is beloved for.
Just give me 10 minutes to go back there and make sure the bastard's dead. Move, Lieutenant Baird.
What was a series known for passable 90s-style action movie campaigns with decent enough character moments, which in my opinion lacked in characterization overall and boiled its lively cast into a handful of stereotypes that left them feeling one note, Judgment went ahead and introduced some of the most impactful and interesting characters to the series, while also reducing the existing fan favorites to stereotypes and completely disregarding the established timeline of events up until this point. Put briefly, the story of Judgment is about the gray area in war.
What do we do?
We take our time.
There's a difference between war and cruelty.
War is cruelty.
As Colonel Loomis, a secondary antagonist to Kilo Squad, quotes General Sherman. There are no heroes, there are hard victories, and what might be the righteous thing is also the wrong choice to make.
We've just activated the light mass, and we're about to...
Not another goddamn word, Lieutenant. That missile is sitting in that silo for a reason.
Now, that'd be a very interesting story to tell, especially in the war-torn universe of Gears, Unfortunately, Judgment doesn't care about telling that story. It starts but entirely leaves it behind instead. Most of the game revolves around Halvo Bay, and how our protagonists take the fight to a locust general who is a boogeyman in Goraznia, the other main human country at the end of the Pendulum Wars. The whole game is comprised of testimony given to us in the form of flashbacks, Kilo Squad being Damon Baird and Augustus Cole, characters from the previous games, Garen Paddock, a member of the UAR and a first for the series, showing us what happened to some of the Indies who survived E-Day.
I was against it, sir.
That's right. Run to Danny.
Maybe you could show me and the army you volunteered for a little respect.
I tried that, and look what it got me.
Sophia Hendrick, a Onyx Guard cadet, and Ezra Loomis, a new COG colonel, who we learn oversaw most of the Onyx Guard until Halvo Bay fell, the same place where the game is set. Now, each of these characters should tie into that theme of gray areas in cruelty and sacrifice, of seeing the war from different perspectives. I mean, we've got a wide berth of backgrounds between our characters. We've got the spoiled rich kid, smart enough but only here because he enlisted to ensure he'd get an inheritance.
Yeah, Professor Elliot. I worked in his lab at LaCroix before he went military.
A celebrity forced to throw away his fame and security for the better of humanity.
Have a raven to you in an hour.
We don't have an hour.
We could be there a whole lot sooner.
An ex-enemy combatant who's proud to be a terrorist and has a very dogmatic view of the world.
Goraznis weren't known for treating prisoners very well. I'm sure you know nothing about it.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
A young cadet who is finding out that asking questions is not how you make it in the COGS regime.
Baird, or Lieutenant, to fire that thing, you have to get the targeting beacon, the launch codes, personally activate the missile on site, and get this all approved by command.
And an older colonel who is stubborn and stuck in his ways of an old war, unprepared for the new threat that sits on their doorstep.
Evac is waiting. Respectfully, you might want to consider postponing the tribunal to...
You might want to consider getting back out there and fighting, Captain.
Sir, they're right outside.
Then it'll be a short walk.
But only Loomis, Sophia, and Paddock have a semblance of a character arc. Baird and Cole, the guys on the cover, and the main characters who we've seen and loved for 3 games up to this point, are entirely driven by the plot and nothing else. If that. Baird's entire story arc of this game is we could be helping people and trying to be the hero. It is nice to see a version of him that is more optimistic and virtuous than the miserable pessimist he is 15 years later, but we don't get to see any of that transition here. There's no major loss that sours his view of the world, no tragedy that dulls him out. The only time he ever experiences any sadness is during the Aftermath campaign, which takes place during Gears 3. For most of the game, his character is stagnant. Now, while I always enjoyed Baird's snippy personality and the great voice work by Fred Tatasquire, I really wish the guy on the cover had more to him than just I want to be a hero, being told no by everyone, and then just getting away with it anyways.
Which you did.
Illegally access military technology. There's a difference.
Pardon me, Lieutenant Baird.
It's Private Baird now. Loomis just demoted me.
My congratulations.
Couldn't have done it without you.
I think that means I might be in charge.
Perfect.
Cole, do we have this much tension between us?
Yeah, I think we might.
Good. Just checking.
And Augustus is even worse. I've complained before that Cole feels like an afterthought in most of the games, more like a checkbox or comic relief box than a character. When there's so much to work with, this is a guy who left behind fame and fortune, who finds humility and service and writes letters to his dead mom to remember her. In the whole of Judgment, he's just here to be here.
Trash ball. You're not a fan. I've been more comfortable, including your ass.
During the campaign, each act follows one character's testimony as the driving force. With Baird, we see him leading Kilo away from their orders. Sophia gets them into the university. Paddock leads them through the suburbs that are booby-trapped. Cole leads them through the top-secret military base where they keep nuclear warheads, because he went through a tour here as a superstar while he was drunk.
That facility's location is classified, Private.
I toured Harbor a few years back. One of your generals was a big fan. Took me on a tour.
and that's his entire contribution to the plot. Normally, Cole works to Baird because Damon is a huge asshole and Cole is very cheery, so they balance each other out.
Who loves you, baby?
Yeah, group hug.
But in Judgment, while Baird is lighter and seemingly more heroic, Cole is just sort of sidelined. He doesn't have that asshole to play off of. He has nothing to do here. They would have been better off grabbing another character, but it feels like Cole was put in here because you need Cole and Baird to be together. Also, on the topic of bad characters with an interesting concept, the Locust General of this game is a deformed Theron named Karn, a Locust who was born messed up, and his shibboleth beast is even a Corpser, a monster of the hollow underground, who was also born malformed. The two, now aided by technology to make the pair an intelligent and deadly combination. Now, that's a fabulous villain. He literally represents the persistence and adaptability of the Locust, even early on. He survives getting a nuke dropped on him, then he just gets gunned down in a plaza. But does Karn do anything to the story? Does he come in and kill a character like how Rom or Scourge were, taking out major characters? No. He just sort of crushes an Onyx guard, and that's it. So while cool in theory, Karn could be replaced by any other faceless Locust and it wouldn't change the script a single bit. Now on the flip side, we have our first character who has an arc, but it's not really a good one, and the rest of everything about her is just off. Yes, Sophia Hendrick, the Onyx Cadet. Now, while she does actually change throughout the story, going from stuck-up student to defecting from the COG, annoyed by the bureaucracy, not only is the change almost instant—
Lieutenant, you have to tell him what we're doing.
I'm gonna rescue Omega.
That's a coincidence. So am I.
expected and uninteresting. Someone defecting or being upset with the COG describes about half of all the Gears characters, not to get all caring about socio-political themes, but it's also really annoying that compared to the women in Gears 3, who get to be on the same level as the men, or even more important, like Anya or Sam, that Sophia is just sort of the woman of the group and nothing more. I just find it distracting that her story and role in the plot is entirely based around her relationships to men. Literal relationships, by the way. In her chapter, she gets us into the academy and gets to lament about her fellow student peers, which could be more fleshed out. It mostly comes down to her saying, "This is sad," and moving on. Then, getting into the researcher's big home, even though it's a character that Baird admits to us he's worked with personally before, Sophia shows us the back door entrance because she used to sleep with her teacher.
He was my teacher, Lieutenant. Whatever else happened, happened.
So, what did happen?
He was married, with kids. I moved on.
And in the end of the game, without any motive of her own aside from being connected to Paddock, which was not established at all during the campaign, Sophia leaves the COG and is later killed off-screen to further the story of Paddock and Baird. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying no female character can ever be in a relationship to be a good character. That's also like half the motivations for Yennefer and Triss in The Witcher. But the fact that nearly every choice made for Sophia in the story revolves around her relationships and nothing else feels kind of odd to me. But getting better on the sliding scale that is Judgment's character is Loomis, the COG colonel who has lived his entire life surrounded by cruelty to the point that he doesn't scoff at lives wasted or hold back on drawing his weapon to prisoners.
This is crazy. I'm waiting on you. Finish up.
Loomis is an asshole, but an asshole with a solid worldview. Not that he's correct, but he's steadfast in his beliefs, whether formed by dogma, propaganda, or internal biases. His secondary plot in the story, besides being the judge, jury, and executioner to Kilo Squad before their trial is interrupted, is that he has a grudge against Paddock.
Paddock. Are you here as Major Paddock of the UIR? Or Private Paddock of the COG?
Whichever one you like less.
The ex-UIR major, who we're told was fond of torturing prisoners and kind of laughs it off when he gets called out for it. Paddock is not a good dude, but neither is Loomis. Both are hardened veterans who kind of do whatever it takes to win. But where Loomis believes in order and command structure of the COG, Paddock goes his own way. making his own order. In the end of the game, after seeing that Paddock is more than a rabid dog than he was made out to be, Loomis shows him the smallest glimmer of respect before the two go their separate ways. A really unique way of showing us just how bad the Locusts are, that besides the grudges and long history of warfare between the COG and the UIR, that this is a great threat worth putting aside those differences so that everyone worth their salt can come together to vanquish this enemy.
Private. Never.
And last but certainly not least is the man himself, Garen Paddock. A terrorist, a war hero, a survivor, a man who is principled in life and in the face of death. Paddock is one of the most interesting Gears characters in the series, because he's actively anti-COG. He's on his own side, a member of the UIR who held up scientists, and in the end days of the last war, he attempted to steal a Hammer of Dawn prototype to go out with a bang, and instead was scarred forever by the same nuclear type of missile they used later on Karn.
Courtesy of your big boom.
His connection to Karn, calling the Locust General a prime threat that conquered all of Goraznia, and his waving off of the rules, pushing Kilo towards the direction of disobedience, is what keeps him really integral to the core of this story.
Control, Kilo here. So, we're gonna get the light mass missile online and use it to kill General Khan. Any objections?
Works for me.
And his finality in Aftermath, where he tells Baird that what his contempt of the COG really means.
You wanna stay friends? Let's never see each other again.
Reinforces the reluctance he had in the main campaign to meet Loomis's hand with a shared respect. He is old, bitter, and hateful, until all of that is entirely undone in Gears 5, which was also written by Tom Bissell, but that's a separate topic, so go watch that video if you want more on that. But aside from how his entire character is flipped 180 in the later games, Paddock in this game is the most whole character. He has the most going on, and his existence poses the most interesting questions, while really fleshing out the world of Gears of War. For all its faults, I can really applaud Judgment for introducing what is easily a top 5 character in the Gears of War universe. Again, until they ruin him for no reason. Beyond all these characters and their roles to the story, the biggest failure to Judgment for me is the ending. Karn is set up as this big bad. He's being underestimated by Loomis, so Kilo run off and steal a nuclear bomb to deal with him. Not only does he survive the blast, but carries out an assault that nearly disassembled the entire COG leadership throughout the city. There's a great place here to set the stakes for the Locust Wars, for them to be a threat. Judgment, like Halo Reach, could end in tragedy to establish how dangerous the Locusts are, but it doesn't. This Locust General, who survives an immense weapon in war so important and dangerous that Loomis threatens to execute Kilo over taking it, and 10 minutes later, Kilo is on the ground and just sort of guns him down without a second thought. And the gameplay itself isn't really much to scream at either. Just earlier this year, me and a friend played through the entire game on insane difficulty while using the declassified challenges, basically special actions that activate during the mission that make it harder for you to complete the mission. The challenge for Karn is to fight him with a suite of elite Locust, and we were both surprised by how easy and quickly we actually got through it. For all this buildup of Karn being a total monster of the Locust Horde, he goes out like a total bitch. In the gameplay itself, and from a narrative viewpoint, it just really makes the entire story feel pointless. Why did we need to nuke him? If it was that easy, why couldn't we just march out and gun him down right outside the museum when he first appears? It's not like Karn is shown to be super damaged or weakened by the blast. It looks like it didn't even scratch him. Instead of setting the stakes for how awful the Locust Wars would be, that they'd ever be so bad to drag on for over a decade, and that humanity would feel forced to destroy almost every city on the planet to avoid extermination, the Locusts just don't feel like a terrifying enemy. They feel like padding, and that ultimately just cheapens the entire conflict.
Revive me!
A multitude of changes were not just seen in the gameplay and in the campaign, but also in the flow of gameplay for the multiplayer. First and most noticeable is the removal of the Locust. Yes, there are no playable Locust in the multiplayer with the sole exception of Overrun. Why was this decision made? Well, according to one dev, because players didn't like to play as Locust.
What?
And to another, they wanted to make the Locust feel more beastie. Now, there's a whole game mode dedicated to the Horde, and at the same time, quote, primarily because it allowed us to explore the depth of personalities of the human characters. Now, after just running through all of the human characters in the campaign, that feels like a joke. Gears of War characters have never been written with enough depth to carry a narrative on their backs, let alone justify nuking an entire faction from the multiplayer. And multiplayer, by design, has no room for personality. What depth are we talking about? The different ways my Onyx Guard can say, "Oh yeah," when he picks up a gun?
Got another!
There was no reason to keep the Locust out of multiplayer, outside of laziness and time constraints. See, in Gears of War Judgment, there's now not only weapon skins for all your loadout guns, but character skins too. Animated or just regular skins apply to each and every character. Now obviously, I have no way to confirm this, but seeing that you can't even customize your Locust in Overrun, the hunch I have is that instead of importing all the Gears multiplayer characters from Gears 3, then modifying them so that the dozens of character skins could be applied to humans and Locust alike, they just did neither. Gears 3 had over 20 characters across COG and the Locust separately. In Judgment, 16 total. 2 pairs share voice actors, 8 are reskins, half are locked behind pre-orders, jerky promos, or flat out removed from the final game. Clayton is in the Aftermath campaign, but not in multiplayer, even though he was in the beta. 3 unique characters were made just for dev use. So what was the focus on the humans again? Because we lost most of them too. The biggest glare on the surface of Judgment's multiplayer seems to be the lack of resources to make it feel fleshed out and finished, and instead we get it in this half-baked, unfinished state. But aside from the personal gripes many fans, including myself, had with the aesthetic choices around the multiplayer, how does it actually hold up to previous games? To compare, we can look at how Gears has always been played. A small loadout, normally the Lancer, Gnasher, Hammerburst, and Snubs, with power weapons scattered around the map to turn the tide. There was always a focus on positioning and playing around cover, whether it was using high ground, wall bouncing, or setting grenade traps. The way you moved around cover would make or break entire games. In Judgment, now they've kind of blended the core Gears gameplay with the strafe shooting and vertical movement of boomer shooters, meaning while cover is still good and it helps you avoid taking damage, for the most part, using ambushes and attacking from above, constant rotations on the high ground and coming up behind your enemy seems to be the most effective. Since survivability is much lower now that the down but not out system has been removed from every game mode except for the one where it's obviously needed. And outside the inclusion of a free-for-all mode, every other game here is what you're used to, with the playlists maybe being a little anemic compared to previous games. But the main standout is of course Overrun, a clash of Horde and Beast mode from Gears of War 3. Where Horde was survival and Beast was chaos, Overrun feels like a chess match. Every class mattered, and every death felt like a crack in the wall. Where one team plays as the humans and needs to defend E-hole covers to slow Locust reinforcements, the Locust, who can play as everything from Tickers to Cantus and Corpsers, have to destroy it. Now, as a light hero shooter mode with abilities and classes, this is leagues better than Beast mode, Arcade and Gears 5, and to be honest, most of the other PvP modes. As someone who's dragged on Judgment since it came out, I can tell you that Overrun has always been and still is one of my favorite modes. It's perfectly Gears, unique to this series and unlike anything else I've played in any other PvP game, and the clash between more standard human classes and the Locust powers is such a fun dynamic. Even people who hate Judgment have been asking for this game to come out of the shitty Judgment game limbo and make its way into the modern Gears of War series. On the downside, Overrun needs its own litany of maps to exist, so that Locust can siege and move down the map. So all the maps for Overrun can't be played in regular PvP, and the same vice versa. But what there is here is a lot of fun, and I hope we get something like this again, but expanded upon in the future. Now, the most important aspect of Overrun are the classes. 4 to be exact, which is integral because it's a 5v5 game, so there's always going to be at least 2 of each class, unlike the Locust who have 8 options to pick from. You have Baird, the engineer with decent combat ability, carrying the Gnasher and able to throw down a sentry turret that shreds enemies. He also gets a repair torch which heals fortifications before the Locust can destroy them. Cole gets all damage weapons, a Lancer, the Bushka, a grenade launcher new to Gears, and the ability to throw ammo boxes for his team. No Cole, no ammo, as long as you've got a decent player on Cole, of course. Sophia is the healer and foundation of the team. A Lancer and a Sawed-Off make her a close-quarter powerhouse, and Stims not only make teammates effectively immortal against ranged attacks, but can raise allies from the dead, permitting that they don't get exploded into meat chunks. And then Paddock, who like the Wretch can climb up into sniper perches to get the high ground against the Locust. He's got a Marksa, another new weapon, which in contrast to the high-power long-shot sniper from before, is a more mid-range mix of battle rifle and a sniper, good for headshots but decent up close too. And with recon grenades that can mark enemies through cover, and as a bonus, marked enemies take more damage. Meaning when used correctly, he can help you eliminate the toughest Locust really quickly. In combination, this makes for a dug-in team that can hold out well when coordinated. Or if you go the silly route and run Paddock 5 times over, good luck. Now, for the ugly side of Overrun, the Locust. If you're familiar with Gears 3's Beast Mode, you'll be seeing a lot of overlap. Tickers, Cantus, Wretches, Grenadiers, these are all the same, the only new creature being the Rager, a Locust entirely unique to Judgment. But while it shares similar monsters, it's not nearly as extensive as Beast was. The Ticker is a kind of combo of the Wild Ticker and Ticker from before, good at ambushing humans or whittling down defenses. The Wretch is a behind enemy lines dive unit. He can climb into the sniper nest to put down Paddock and leap over cover to get at the humans right away, or use their scream to stun the cog while their allies gun them down. The Grenadier is better equipped than he was in Gears 3, wielding a Lancer and a Gnasher with recharging grenades. The Cantus has a hammer burst this time around, because the iconic Gorgon just couldn't be asked for, I guess, but it still has their traditional healing maneuver. The Rager, who is new, wields a Breach Shot, another new weapon that domes in a single headshot and is more medium range without a scope like the Marksa. They can also rage, turning into a mini berserker that can wipe out nearly any cog with a swipe of their paw. The Mauler is almost the same as before, big shield, big mace, go boom, although this time they can select to spin their shield, instantly killing anyone who touches it and reflecting arms fire back at their enemies. The Serapede is the same. The Corpser, however, can now move while underground, compared to Gears 3 where they could sorta just duck out of the way, allowing them to bypass fortifications or cover and get right up behind enemy lines like a wrecking ball. Just like the Cog side, a smart mix of bulky bruisers and little pests can crack defenses wide open. Pair them with Grenadiers and you're golden. Honestly, in my experience, 5 Grenadiers gets the job done just fine. They can go down but not out, they don't need a Cantus to babysit them, and they pack enough heat to overwhelm just about anything. Overall, the best addition to the franchise and shining example to me that Judgment isn't bad, just underbaked, is Overrun. It's inventive, it's fun, it feels like Gears while being new at the same time. Overrun was a spark from a dying engine, brief, bright, and then gone. I feel like if this game as a whole had another year of development, it could have been a continuation along the lines of Gears 3 and go down as something special. But we know for other reasons, like Gears of War eventually being sold in 2014, that was never going to happen. So, the most interesting regression in Judgment that I can only rationalize as being somewhere between not having enough time and not wanting to waste maps on Overrun alone, we have a new mode to Gears known simply as Survival. Most literally, it's Overrun without an enemy team, where you play as the COG exclusively and face off against AI Locust for 10 waves. Now, why they chose this instead of having Horde from before? Also, considering Judgment is almost entirely built on the foundations of Gears 3? I couldn't tell you. Like everything else, it just feels like a speedy addition that needed more time. Now, what's different about Survival? Well, not much. It's Overrun, like I said, but a few extra Locust and it goes for 10 waves. But otherwise, if you've played the COG in Overrun, just get ready for more of that to be drawn out for an hour. Compared to Horde, it doesn't have boss waves, you can't make fortifications, you don't have challenges, it really just is Overrun with less going on. The biggest difference I've found compared to Overrun is that because it goes for longer and there could be more enemies than in PvP, you cannot rely on AI teammates. They either ignore what's happening, are bad at deploying their abilities, or just straight out suck. But if you squad up with human allies, at least competent ones, Survival becomes a walk in the park.
Cole, can you give me an ammo box?
Ammo's going out.
It's not even in the map. It's not even in the map.
So with all the important stuff covered, let's go over Judgment's most staggering inclusion. Loot boxes! Yes, before Battlefront 2, before FIFA, before Apex Legends, Gears of War Judgment is one of the earliest AAA games to include gambling for in-game skins. Except, it didn't. See, Judgment has a series of boxes that range from normal to epic to rare that give out different skins for your guns and armor in-game, but they are entirely free, given out on player levels, unlocking ribbons or killing enemies across all the modes. And again, I find myself asking, Gears of War 3 had a near-perfect system of tying specific skins and unlocks to challenges in-game. Play 500 of any PvP match to get Classic Marcus and label yourself a veteran. Earn $5 billion in Horde and get Ice-T. Complete the campaign on Insane and get a special weapon skin. In Judgment, which still contains all the same medals and new ones specific for this game, by the way, this is just removed to be replaced by boxes? Why? Why do they keep making these changes when the game you're basing this on already had it done and down? I just don't understand which manager at Epic or People Can Fly felt like this was the time to chase trends and mix up systems that fans loved. It's so annoying because it feels clear with the things in this game that if they were given another year or two, even enough time to upgrade the game to Unreal 4 and start off the Xbox One generation with a Gears game that took all of 3's best qualities and merged them with a Quake-esque shooter, they could have gone so hard. Instead, we get this half-baked, messy, incomplete mess. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not that Judgment is bad, but that it's easy to see just how good it could have been.
Hate this stupid city.
What's his problem?
Long story.
In 2013, the world was introduced to the last Gears of War game on the Xbox 360. At first, it left an enormously bad taste in people's mouths after Gears of War 3 was hit or miss for a lot of especially casual fans, doing worse than Gears of War 2, and Judgment suffering even more. In the years to come, it unanimously remained as the worst Gears of War game in the series until people really came to dislike Gears 5 and either forgave Judgment or kept it at the bottom. From an objective level, there's no way 5 is worse though. Personally, Judgment is probably a lot higher on my list than anyone would expect, especially after this scathing review. Because if you asked me for the order of the games, I'd tell you Gears 4, Gears 3, Tactics, Judgment, 5, 2, Ultimate Edition, and the OG first game at the very bottom. Now clearly, Judgment isn't a better game than those I put it above. Hell, I just said that 5 is objectively better. But that's the thing about taste, it applies so widely. And to me, Judgment is like Little Caesars. Are there better pizza places? Yes. But if I want something quick, easy, stupid, and fun, Judgment is always right there, and even though it missed the mark on nearly everything it set out to do, it has this really unique identity that most Gears games don't have, and there's something about that which always brings me back. Where Gears 2 and 3 might be an upgrade on Gears of War 1, there is no other game that plays like Judgment. Gears of War Judgment is one of the strangest, most polarizing entries in the franchise, less a misstep and more a full-on identity crisis. The campaign abandons the series' traditional grit and pacing in favor for a faster, score-driven structure wrapped in forgettable narration and arcade-style modifiers that undermine the emotional weight. Multiplayer, once the heart of Gears, is gutted, no classic maps at launch, and a baffling shift to vertical, speed-oriented arena design that feels more like Quake than it does Gears. The fan-favorite Horde mode is MIA, replaced with a watered-down survival mode that lacks the tension or strategy that made its predecessor iconic. Even the skin unlock system is compromised, replacing skill-based rewards from Gears 3 with pseudo-loot boxes that, while free, still reflect a clear pivot toward trend-chasing over fan service. And yet, Judgment isn't without charm. Underneath its rushed ideas and half-baked system lies a unique energy, a game that tried to innovate, even if it tripped over itself while doing so. It's not the best Gears, it might not even be a good one, but for all its flaws, Judgment stands as a fascinating relic of a franchise at a crossroads. One you can't help but come back to, like a microwaved slice of Little Caesars at 1 a.m. At certain times, it just gets the job done. But with that, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know down below. Have you played Judgment? Do you like it, or did you never hate it to begin with? I still kinda hold a grudge that we lost Bulletstorm 2 for this. And as always, a big thank you to all my members and patrons who you can join for just $1 a month on either platform. You can get all my videos early, get some access to behind the scenes specialties, and even more just down below. With grace, stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.